I have to start with a disclaimer to my, we can have the first slide, please. Who do I point it at? Point it at my boss. It won't work. Can my boss the first slide, please? Thank you. I'll start with a disclaimer to my fellow Europeans. I'm British, but I like the euro. I like it so much that I have a mortgage on a house in euros, so that's how much I am fond of it. I also like Germany, and I like Greece a lot. And the reason I have to say this is because talking about the euro is fraught with danger. I think I'm going to have to ask Robin for a bodyguard when I next go to Frankfurt. I've had Greeks crying on me, I've had Germans wanting to hit me, and only 2 weeks ago I was in a fighting match, a shouting match with a Frenchman about Eurobonds. And of course this is the problem with the euro, is that it is so political, so toxic, and of course that is one of the things that makes this so difficult to solve. The second point here is that if your company is not thinking about what it will do if the euro collapses, you are in a bad place. You should all be thinking what you will do if something bad happens. We think the euro will survive, but it is very, very touch and go. So when you go back tomorrow to your companies, get thinking what you do if the euro collapses. This is a very, very serious thing. If it collapsed, it would be far worse than Lehman Brothers. So we do have to get real about this. And the last point is I must share this wonderful picture from The Economist. It's a cover from last year, I think. Occasionally their covers are inspired, and this is one of the best I think they've ever done. It is, of course, the German Chancellor, Frau Merkel. She's angry. She is not happy. And of course there are plenty of reasons why she isn't happy. She's not done a bad job in my view of sorting this out, but don't make her angry. This is actually a little joke. I don't know whether you picked up on it. Apocalypse now, Acropolis now. Okay, it's late. I know you've sat through a whole day's worth of this. A little Economist joke for you, so to kick off. Well, I'm trying to explain to people where we are in this whole Eurozone saga. I found a very useful way of thinking about it is the 5 stages of grief. So if you have some bad news, you didn't get that promotion, for example, you will be thinking along these lines. You will have these emotions. The first one will be denial. I needed that promotion, it was mine, why didn't I get it? Well, this is what we had, of course, in 2008, 2009. The Europeans said, well, it is all the fault of the Americans, the Anglo-Saxons, nothing to do with us. And of course, there were similar issues in the Eurozone as there were in the United States. So we had denial. Then we had anger. We've got the Northern Europeans versus the Southern Europeans. The Northern Europeans are austere, they save, they're diligent. The Southern Europeans have a bit of a better life, a bit more partying. So there's a bit of friction there because of different views of the world. I think we're here now, bargaining. This is basically Frau Merkel, the German leader, saying, okay, the Greeks can default, but please not while I'm in charge. Let's just push it away, or various ways of trying to sort this out that don't involve recognizing the truth. Next stage is depression, and this I think we are quite close to. And this happens, of course, when you finally realise what you have to do, but you don't like having to do it. So in the case of the Eurozone, it is the Germans and the stronger countries having to pay for it. The weaker countries having to do all the reforms, and then once you have that, you have acceptance, and then you can get the solutions. The good news is, of course, that we are quite far down these 5 stages of grief. The bad news is that you can experience all these 5 stages at the same time, and you can go backwards as well. But if I'm right, and we are at the depression stage, then we are quite close to some sort of solution. And as I said, we do expect the Eurozone to survive, but the danger of collapse is very high. So do watch this, all these emotions. Diagnosing the problem, well, I think it's quite old news, nothing new here. But the problem with the Eurozone, it is not a fiscal or a political union. It is only a monetary solution, so it was incomplete when it was put together. And these are the factors that you have to have if it's going to be successful, and we don't have them, unfortunately. Also, the rules, there were some rules there, but there's only one thing that not having a rule, as we say here, and that's having a rule and not obeying it. And this is the Growth and Stability Pact. And all the countries are all at fault there. No one is guilt-free in the Eurozone, not even the stronger countries. France and Germany both flouted the Growth and Stability Pact. So there are issues with the structure here. There are also issues within the Eurozone itself, and what you're going to see here really is a graphic description of all the structural issues within the Eurozone, how different these countries are within this same framework. I'm going to show you the first line here is Germany. This is private consumption, which I've normalized at Q1 2000, and basically it's real private consumption, so consumption of things. And what you can see here is, hang on, before I go on, any Germans in the audience? Oh, okay, okay, oh, there's quite a few of you, right, I'm going to be careful. Any Greeks? Speak now. Your last chance, okay. Okay. Madam, you at the back? Okay. What you can see here is something I think that could only have happened in Germany. Against the background of the biggest boom, global boom, the planet has ever seen, what you see here is the German consumer, in effect, not consuming anything more in 2009 than he was in 2000. So this was Germans being very frugal, saving, taking wage suppression, not spending, being very, very careful about how they spend their money. We're going to look at the other countries now, and bear in mind, the further these other countries depart from the blue line, the less competitive, in effect, they are becoming. Let's take a look at Spain. My goodness. That was the boom, or the mother of all booms. The sangria was flowing, the siestas were being had. This, of course, was the great construction boom, bigger even than that of the United States in relative terms, extraordinary. Oh, let's look at Greece, goodness me, again, even more. And, of course, the mother of all booms was in Ireland. So all of these countries becoming uncompetitive against the Germans who are not spending. They're becoming very, very competitive. And the one I really feel actually quite sorry for is Portugal. Poor little Portugal, bust, but no party. Unlike the others, had a great party. At least the Greeks are bankrupt, but at least they enjoyed the last 10 years. Portuguese, they're bankrupt, and they had no party. So, just everything's relative. If what needs to be done to save this project, well, as we'll see in the next couple of slides, you do have to have fiscal austerity. Yes, the Greeks do have to behave fiscally. Yes, they do. You do have to have fiscal transfers, I think. But the most important thing, and this is why the policies that are coming out at the moment, why they're so worrying, there are no really credible plans for getting Greece to grow again. And without growth, this cannot work. Without growth, Greece may leave the euro. So if you're looking for a broad set of policies that are going to solve this, look for the policies for growth as well as the policies for reform. Very, very important. Three mad ideas that won't happen. Well, Germans in Germany, Frankfurt, they say, well, we're going to go. We're going to leave. Yeah? You can't. If you leave, the whole thing will fall to pieces. Without Germany, there is no point in having the eurozone. I cannot imagine the French wanting to be the anchor country for the euro. I just can't see it. So if Germany left, I think the whole thing would fall to pieces, and all these other sort of strange, complicated ideas for saving the euro. Again, either you have the euro as it is, or you don't, with Germany or no euro at all. Our core scenarios our core forecast for the euro is that it does survive, as I've said. That Greece defaults, probably quite soon, that's fairly obvious. And that they're sort of muddled through, that we do just enough, the politicians do just enough to get the markets on side to allow it to survive. Now you're all looking at me thinking, goodness me, that's a heroic forecast. It is, and I think the risk of that not happening is quite high, but that's what we're thinking at the moment. But there are lots of other sort of permutations. I'll just take you through a couple of them. One is that Greece leaves the euro and the euro single currency survives. So one of the reasons people say that Greece should leave is, of course, that the new drachma, the new currency, would sink like a stone, and that would, of course, make them very competitive in terms of their exports. Okay, my question to you is, does anyone have any idea what Greece exports?
Services, tourism.
Olive oil, services, yeah. Did I hear feta cheese anyway? Yes, I did, yeah. Yeah. What I'm not getting here is a very high value added export basket that's really going to be, I suppose, segue right into the Chinese growth story and so on. Basically, Greece has nothing of value to export apart from olive oil, ouzo, cement. Actually, no one talked about cement, but they do export cement. The economy is also very closed. You can see there in this chart, the green is exports and the blue is the GDP. You can see that exports as a percent of Greece's economy are actually very small. Unlike Ireland, which is actually doing very well at the moment, relatively well, and exports are very high as a percent of their economy, and they have things people want, high-tech, biotech, young population, FDI regime that's very good, and so on. So if Greece left, actually the benefits in terms of exports are really not going to be that great, and of course you get inflation following thereafter. The argument people put is often that Argentina did it in 2001 when they defaulted. Well, yes, they did, and you can see there that really brutal correction there in 2002. And yes, in terms of growth, they really did power on after that. But that was only because of China and because of Chinese buying soya and the other commodities that Argentina has. And Greece just doesn't have those things to sell. And of course, over the last 10 years, the growth was very good in the global economy, and now it's not. So really not an answer for Greece. And if you look here again, this slices the Argentina story in another way. This is cash levels. Look at private consumption there. The green is Argentina, the blue is Hungary. Up to the default, Argentinian private consumption was about 4 times the size of Hungarian private consumption. Then you have a 2/3 crash in the peso, and then it's the same. They're both the same. So I think 2/3 devaluation, it would be pretty likely in this case, and of course it would shred Greece's living standards, not necessarily an answer at all. The other point, of course, is that Greece leaves and the Eurozone collapses, and here it's all about the C word. It's all about contagion. And if Greece leaves, my big fear, I think it probably would happen, is you do get contagion, and countries like Portugal, which really are very similar to Greece in some respects, also get attacked by the markets. And of course the one that everyone's worried about is Italy, because Italy's bond market, government bond market, is the 3rd largest in the world after the US and Japan, 2 trillion euros. If that goes, then the whole euro project will fail, no doubt whatsoever. If you look at this chart, though, it shows you that these countries are actually quite different internally. Spain, for example, has had a huge private sector debt problem. This is net assets, so that the assets of the whole country netted off. You can see that is minus 80, just a little bit better than Greece. Italy actually is far less. Italy runs a current account that's in balance, and a primary budget surplus, or just about in balance. So the dynamics are different, but if you have Greece leaving, there's a big risk that contagion then spreads, and that really would be very bad news indeed. I said at the beginning that if the Eurozone collapsed, it would be a depression. Think of the banks that are wiped out, think of the companies that are wiped out. It would affect every single company in this room to a greater or lesser extent. So it would be very, very serious indeed. Depression in the Eurozone, recession in the US, and a global recession as well. So very, very bad news indeed. So contagion, a very big risk. I think this is more likely, and this is where I'm sort of more hopeful, that you do get some kind of fiscal union, if you like, even if it's not in the sense of Eurobonds or a federal Euro budget, for example. But even the EFSF is a kind of embryonic fiscal union. So you will get some form of transfers, and this will allow the Eurozone to survive. But really, if you talk to voters in the European Union, in the Eurozone, people are not happy. So the politicians have a very great, a big task cut out to persuade people this is going to be a good idea. But with no fiscal union, you don't have a Eurozone, in my view. What this means for China? Well, of course, this is a collapse would be a major event. So do prepare for that. Do think of contingencies for that. Of course, it would come partly through the trading route, because the Eurozone EU is China's largest trading partner. Currency planning for Chinese companies would become a nightmare. You'd have a very weak lira, escudo, all these drachmas, all this other stuff would be very difficult. Some countries would actually become very competitive against you. Italy, perhaps, with its cars, its textiles, and so on. So very difficult to do business planning. And of course, FDI. Inflows of FDI into China would slow, and we've talked about protectionism already here. No surprises to guessing why that would be. There are, however, opportunities there. We've talked about M&A, we've talked about acquisitions. So clearly, if you get your politics right and you can see companies that you could acquire at prices with the really ridiculously low prices, if you can negotiate, would be a great opportunity. But it would be, I think, very fraught in terms of the politics here, but you could pick up some very interesting companies. Also lending opportunities, I think, for Chinese banks moving in onto turf of European banks that are too weak to lend within Europe, so you get some new clients. But also think you must be agile, because even within a downward cycle, you can have upward cycles within the downward cycle, so you must be prepared to be really very analytical about the state of the economy and about the state of the countries within the Eurozone. But there are opportunities, but you do have to be nimble, flexible, and very, very diplomatic, I think, to get the most out of them. This should make you feel quite good. It's this kind of variation on the slide that Robin showed at the very beginning. You can see this is the world. In red is the world as it was in 2007, when the world was much easier, and in blue it's in 2020, and it's the top 12. Economies in 2020, lined up by size, and you can see that China is number one there. This Eurozone crisis, one of the other panelists was talking about China really being pushed to the top table here. Well, this is a graphic evidence of that, I think. China very much at number one. I put the top 12 in because Korea is number 12, and 5, as you'll see, 5 of the top 12 are in Asia. So it's a China story, and it's also an Asia story as well. So definite shifting patterns there. I started with Frau Merkel, and I have to end with her. And this is not been seen before by the outside world, and it is from Sitao, a good friend there. He is waving at everybody. This is an example of Chinese innovation at its best. So while we should all be confident about the Chinese economy, this Sitao put this together. Frau Merkel and Sarkozy on the Titanic, sailing off goodness knows where, trying to avoid the icebergs. Same bed, different dreams. Well, let's hope that's not the case, and they do manage to pull something out of the hat at future meetings. But anyway, that was a swift canter through our view of the Eurozone. I'm very happy to take any questions, and thank you for listening. Thank you. Any questions? Oh, yes.
Is it fair to say that the euro debt and virtually investment to Europe is actually untouchable, to a certain extent at least?
Could you explain a little more what you mean?
Because the situation out there is so opaque, and it's so difficult to understand the whole thing, and therefore it would be very difficult to appreciate what's really happening out there. And most importantly, that region will suffer a very long, maybe a stagflation even in the next decade. So it will be the sort of loghead, at least for our generation. Why we should spend the money out there instead of those booming, robust, dramatic areas in Asia, Africa, and Latin America instead?
That's a very good point, actually. Even if the Eurozone survives, as we think it will, it doesn't mean that Greece and Portugal are suddenly going to become Eurozone tigers. growing very quickly. They're still going to be stagnating. We're just going to be stagnating inside the Eurozone rather than sort of flailing outside it. So you're right, even if things go well, Eurozone growth outlook isn't actually that good. I mean, I think 1 to 2% if things are going well would actually be quite good. Why you'd want to be in the Eurozone, however, is because unlike these robust high growth markets, you have a lot of really still very rich people. You have a lot of aging people that will need services, will want to buy things. You have a lot of very sophisticated consumers. If they get it right, then it won't be sort of exciting growth, but it will be stable growth in a very rich area. So it offers a sort of different type of growth, if you like. Also, what you get, of course, if you invest in the Eurozone is you get access to technology, to techniques, to people that you wouldn't get, say, if you invest in somewhere like Nigeria, for example. So it's a different kind of market. It's not, as you say, it is opaque, and the growth outlook is not that good, but it's still worth being there because it's still a rich, large part of the world. Any other questions? Yes.
Thank you. I think instability is really the most worrisome phenomenon in the world economy. In that sense, is that better for China to bail out Greek, so that since it's the most vulnerable part of the Eurozone, or China should do nothing, whether for the collapsing of the euro eventually?
That's a very good question. Well, given how the accumulation of US treasuries, how political that is within China, and given that the US is in a relatively better place than somewhere like Greece is, I think to buy Greek government debt at this juncture, or Spanish or even Italian, would not be a very good idea. Clearly, if Chinese do want to buy this debt, then they do have to extract their pound of flesh. You don't want to just do it for sort of charity reasons. But I think there are other ways of investing in the Eurozone that will probably pay a better return than buying dodgy debt from the peripheral countries. But China does have an excess of money as well. Is looking to diversify out of treasuries, absolutely rightly so. But of course, China has so much money. The choice of investment vehicles is not actually that great at the moment. So the excitement over possible Chinese buying of Italian bonds a couple of weeks ago was, in my view, indicative of how desperate things are in the Eurozone, rather than a sign that Chinese are really going to go and buy Italian debt. Yes.
Well, as you said, that nowadays the Eurozone is facing very big challenge, and based on your scenario, Euro also face some difficulties. Right now, China have a large, very large, foreign reserves, and how to keep the value of these large foreign reserves. And some people say that now is a good time for RMB to go abroad, to globalization, and to become stronger. What's your views on China, RMB's globalization? What's the strategy you would like to point out for the Chinese government?
Well, the accumulation of foreign exchange reserves at the pace that it has been over the past few years is a sign that there's something wrong, I think, with the Chinese sort of economic model. It's sort of reaching the end of its useful shelf life, if you like. So clearly, you do have to think about other ways of getting growth that don't involve you sort of continually putting money into the US government. Anyone, regardless of whether you're pro-renminbi peg or not or whatever, I think everybody recognises that China's future really does lie in a rebalancing away from this. His government as well obviously recognises this, away from exports towards domestic demand-driven growth. This can only happen in a sort of sustainable way if you do have deeper financial markets, more sophisticated financial instruments and so on, and that can only happen if you have capital account liberalization, which of course means you have a free-floating renminbi eventually. So I think this is what happened with the renminbi. We haven't really talked about it today, but it is for me one of the great issues for the next 5 to 10 years, and it will continue to sort of worry Chinese policymakers and be a political thing. Well, I think you cannot have China escaping the middle income trap that Robin was talking about until you have more movement in terms of financial sector reform. But it's fraught with danger. Of course it is, because you're giving up control. But it has to happen if China is really to escape this middle income level. So I think it's encouraging what the Chinese are doing in Hong Kong in terms of international, sort of testing the water, if you like. That's a good thing. And my bet is it'll happen in a way that we don't forecast, because the Chinese government's very good at surprising people. But I think the direction is right, but we have to hope that it happens in a managed way, that it doesn't take too long. I think we're done for time now, so thank you again for your questions. Thank you.